conditions with stimulative long-term fiscal and monetary policies, our economy still has plenty of room to grow. Indeed, he further that present economic expansion will continue for at least 3 years, with the potential to continue with 9 more years of robust growth. Unfortunately, a prioritization of reducing the federal debt would cut this current prosperity short for 2 reasons. First, creating a borrowing frenzy. In order to reduce the debt, the government will need to take in more tax revenue than the amount of money it spends and puts back into the economy, effectively running a budget surplus. Unfortunately, Ray 10 of the Levi Economics Institute writes that when the government runs budget surpluses, it constrains the total amount of money available to the private sector, forcing the private sector to borrow more money to maintain the same activities as before. For example, Ray continues that after Clinton ran a budget surplus in 1998, household borrowing increased by 30% of GDP the decade after. Unfortunately, Big 16 of the University of Pennsylvania outlined that sudden spikes in private debt often create a credit bubble as people borrow too much, increasing susceptibility to even slight economic shocks and creating increased chances of a recession. Moreover, Gulter 17 of American Institute of Economic Research continues that private debt also makes recessions harder to recover from, as households and corporations face high loan repayments alongside plummeting income. Second, promoting a safe assets conundrum. Buchanan 12 of George Washington University explicates that because our government finances our debt by selling treasury bonds, reducing the national debt would entail buying these bonds back. When this happens, Krishnamurthy 13 of Northwestern University writes, the reductions in the supply of treasury bonds on the market result in a shift to more risky and dangerous investments, as it lowers the profits from treasuries relative to speculative corporate investments. Indeed, he quantifies that a $1 decrease in the supply of treasuries increases the amount of risky short-term private debt by 50 cents. As a result, Acharya 18 of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York impacts the reductions in government debt result in the formation of risky economic bubbles as investors speculate on overvalued assets. He continues that when these bubbles eventually burst, it plunges the country into deep recession. Moreover, Acharya continues that larger supplies of safe assets from higher levels of government debt actually help the country ride out a recession because these bonds, or safe assets, serve as a foundation for our economy, limiting how far we can fall. Because of these 2 reasons, Ray 10 of Levi Economics Institute warned that every time in our country's history we reduced the national debt, it was immediately followed by a scathing economic depression. And due to the interconnectedness of our global economic system, every recession leaves millions devastated. For example, the World Bank 10 quantifies that the 2008 crisis plunged 64 million people into extreme poverty within the first 2 years of the Depression. And when this recession does hit, prioritizing reducing the federal debt will leave us grossly unprepared to respond. Perry 14 of Tufts University writes that in order to reduce the federal debt, policymakers would need to put automatic stabilizers or social spending that immediately kicks in to reduce the severity of a recession on the chopping block. Indeed, Capretta 18 of the American Economics Institute writes that reducing the national debt to 41% of the GDP would entail cuts in policies that would reduce our GDP by 4% every year until 2033. This is because, as Ray continues, that even completely eliminating welfare payments, Medicaid, Medicare, military spending, Social Security payments, and a host of other programs would still leave the budget deficit at $400 billion. Cutting these policies would be devastating during a recession. Sandy 15 of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities quantifies that without the fiscal stimulus immediately used after the 2008 downturn, more than 17 million more jobs would have been lost, the recession would have lasted 3 more years, and the unemployment rate would have skyrocketed 6% higher than it did. Thus, communicate.
As you and I have heard, intention one is a debt sellout. Amadeo T of MIT explains that it is in China's grand strategy in the long term to replace the dollar with the yuan as the global currency in an attempt to pass the US as the global hegemon. Consequently, he concludes, if China started to dump US bonds, the dollar would collapse, disrupting international markets even more than the 2008 financial crisis, pushing millions into poverty. Fortunately, reducing the debt solves as it lowers our reliance on China's bonds and would allow the US to quickly diversify or buy back lost Chinese bonds. The Economist confirms that in 2001, the U.S. successfully paid off $363 billion worth of public debt by running a budget surplus. Our second contention is a conflict of interest. The U.S.'s current neglect of the national debt is increasing interest rates for two reasons. The first is supply and demand. Arif Hussein, 18 of the TRP, explains that the issuance of U.S. Treasury bonds has exploded due to massive tax cuts and irresponsible spending. Unfortunately, he furthers that the supply of debt on the market far outpaces the demand from investors. To attract more investors, the interest rate or yield of Treasury bonds increases. Thus, Schiff 18 is seeking out reports that yield on our debt hit a 10-year high due to the massive amount of debt issued by the government, concluding that the era of low interest rates is finally coming to an end. Second is growth acceleration. Horowitz 18 of 538 explains that America's high deficits are injecting stimulus into the economy through tax cuts and spending increases. Dom 18 of CNBC furthers that the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates in an attempt to curb this rampant growth and inflation. Fortunately, Erwin Kellner, 14 of Market Watch, finds that debt reduction in the form of tax hikes and spending cuts would moderate economic growth, reducing the need for higher interest rates. Rising interest rates have two impacts. Subpoint A is aggressive austerity. As interest rates grow, the government has to direct more money to pay off interest to its bondholders. Michael Collins, 18 of USA Today, reports that interest payments could total $7 trillion by 2026. Increasing the amount of money interest rates take from the government chokes out the federal budget, increasing austerity policy. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, if no action is taken now, the government will be eventually forced to implement new economy-crushing taxes and painful cuts in spending. The longer we wait, the harder it gets. The Peterson Foundation 18 finds that waiting just 5 years would cause the required size of reforms to increase by 21%, undermining any chance of a gradual approach. Shifting government revenues to pay off interest rates would be devastating, as Alexia Campbell, 18 of Vox, quantifies that government benefits keep 44 million people out of poverty. Subpoint B is electrifying emerging markets. The BBC 18 explains that higher interest rates in America disincentivize investors from investing in foreign developing economies because they will gain higher returns from buying American treasury bonds, contributing to a loss of capital and currency in such countries. In fear of losing capital, central banks in these countries are hiking their own interest rates in response, making it harder for the poor to access credit. The BBC continues that rising U.S. interest rates are already fueling currency crises across the globe in countries such as Argentina, Turkey, and Brazil. Historically, this cycle of competing interest rates has electrocuted the developing world, as a 2015 Jubilee Debt Campaign report finds that rising U.S. interest rates in the 80s and 90s single-handedly reduced developing economies back to 19% of per capita GDP and relegated an additional 125 million people to live in poverty. Even absent these two impacts, neglecting the debt issue will prompt a disastrous credit downgrade. Already, Masters 13 of the Council on Foreign Relations reports that the downgrading of America's credit ranking in 2011 led to one of the worst single-day drops in the stock market's history, and Brian Chapata, 18 of Bloomberg, adds that without an immediate response to the debt issue, our rating will continue to plummet. Such an event would be as disastrous as Galani 11 concludes that a debt downgrade would result in forced asset sales that are so widespread, it would cause a global stock crash and economies around the world would be hurt. The impact of a global recession is mass poverty, as Tufts University quantifies. The 2008 global crisis pushed 100 million people into poverty worldwide. That's the
Just the one that says that, like, if we continue to let the debt continue, our debt gets down.
Second one?
Oh, it depends on the judge's
Great. That was 8 seconds.
China sold off bonds yet?
Because like right now, China's basically just stocking up bonds and increasing the leverage it has over the U.S. When it wants to, it can pull out at like any minute. But like the more concerning thing actually is like not that China isn't selling off the bonds; it's the leverage that China has over the U.S. But back on your case, could I have a question? Okay. So would you agree that at some point the U.S. will inevitably have to pay off its debt? Like some point, maybe it's farther down the road, but like inevitably the U.S. has to pay off its debt at some time, right?
So going back to China. How far are they? Like, how much are they going to keep increasing their leverage, right? Because they've probably done that the last 20 years, right?
Like, it really doesn't matter if they increase leverage or decrease leverage. The point is they have so much leverage over the U.S. economy that puts it as like a big disadvantage.
Okay, wait, can I follow?
Yeah,
How much of the U.S.'s debt does China?
I think it's like 7% or 8%.
So 7% of the debt.
I mean that's a lot, honestly. Like nobody else holds 7% of the debt, right? But back on your case, right? So you can see that at some point we're gonna have to pay off the U.S. debt. At that point, at some point, that bubble is going to form and your borrowing frenzy is going to happen. If that is inevitable, isn't it better to have that happen right now so we pay off less debt and it's like a smaller bubble comparatively than like down the road?
I would say like that's like we'll probably never pay off all of our debt.
I mean, you said inevitably like sometime down the road we have to pay off the debt. At that point, like when you say a bubble is going to create, I mean, you said like. I asked you, like, is it going to be paid down the road?
Yeah,
and, like, I think it makes sense.
Years and years down the
yeah,
line,
it doesn't
right?
matter when it happens, because insofar as it does happen, that means the bubble forms and the borrowing frenzy occurs. If that's the case,
we say that's worse right now because right now we're at the capacity for the economy to keep growing and like.
Okay, but like fundamentally, if
Can I
you.
ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so in your first point, you say that interest rates are going to rise, right? But doesn't that and then you say that investors are going to fill in with this demand if there's high interest rates from emerging markets.
Yeah.
So doesn't that mean you already solved half the problem?
No, it's like not solving the problem. Like we say high interest rates are bad because investors choose between the developing world and the U.S. And we say comparatively it's better if investors put their money in the developing world because they need more help. But like back on your case, right? Like why is it better to have the bubble burst right now? I mean, why is it better to have the bubble burst like way down the road comparatively to right now?
We would say that right now, when there's like when there's more economic prosperity, first like people are saving more because of the period of expansion, which means that they can ride out the recession.
Even if there is even if there's economic productivity, right? If we wait just 5 years, the bubble is 21% bigger. So why would we wait and just increase the size of the bubble and have a bigger recession?
Why is the bubble 21% bigger?
Yeah, because interest rates compound, and over time, the amount of reform just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because our debt piles up. That's why by 2026, $7 trillion of our debt is going to be solely off of interest rates. So if we just pay off the debt now and prioritize debt reduction right now, the bubble never gets so big, not as many people get hurt.
Okay, how are you going to pay off the debt? Like, how much are you? When do you reach the bright line of actually like being enough to pay off the debt?
I mean, like you say that like the borrowing frenzy is triggered just from like trying to prioritize it. So like either will it happen, even if that isn't paid off.
Everybody ready? Time starts now. Start with Wang. If they win their entire case but lose ours, they still lose the round. This is what Ray 10, the Levi Economics Institute writes that because tax revenues falls, incomes plummet during recession. Recessions actually result in ballooning deficits. This means that prioritizing debt reduction causes a recession now. They don't have any solvency at all for the far future. Because we would say that a recession is only going to increase our debt further. But then, let's further China's sell-off argument. At the top, 3 pieces of linked defense here. The first comes from their own author, Amadeo 18 of the Balance, who writes that China has no incentive to sell off American debt because it crashed China's economy due to the interconnectedness of their two countries. They say this themselves, which means that China never has an incentive because it immediately shaft the entire international order. But the second problem they're dealing with it again, because what Light 18 of CBS News writes is that China would never sell off America's treasuries because it uses these treasuries to maintain financial stability inside its own financial markets, which means that they sell out American dollar that actually increases fluctuations and increases volatility of the yuan, which means they're not going to do it because the increasing volatility of the yuan makes it much less likely likely to become a global reserve. The third, dealing with the argument again, because the Zhao 18 of the South China Morning Post writes that China actually needs to buy more U.S. treasuries because it needs to liquefy its assets so it can pay off rising foreign debt payments, which means that China's not going to sell off American treasuries because it needs them right now to liquefy its assets. Go to their second contention about interest rates. At the top, two pieces of linked defense. What first, Dorfman 18 of Forbes writes is that the Federal Reserve engages in open market operations where they buy trillions in bonds in order to increase the money supply and stimulate the economy. And these policies artificially keep interest rates low, which is why Hubbard 18 of Columbia University writes is that our deficit has historically only had a 0.15 correlation with our interest rate. It's not statistically significant. But second, dealing with the argument again, because what Tammy 17 of Forbes writes is that the decline of treasury yields from the status quo indicate that investors are not worried at all about our ability to finance the debt. These advances in automation are about to dramatically expand our country's economic capacity, rendering debts exceedingly small, which means that in the long term our economy is going to grow so fast that the debt is completely overtaken by the higher tax revenues. Go to their first warrant about supply and demand. Three responses here. First comes from Long 18 of Reuters, who writes that Wall Street is completely softening up the increased supply of treasuries after Trump's tax cuts, because so in China the street writes days ago that fears of a slowing economy in China is causing a flight to quality treasury bonds, indicating that demand is matching supply, which means that they don't post data or analysis, which means that right now treasuries yields are on the decline. The second, dealing with the argument again, because what so in China continues, so that treasury yield rates are at the lowest level in a year, which clearly indicates that demand is actually outpacing supply. But third, there's a contradiction with this argument. This warrant completely contradicts their BBC evidence, which says that higher yields in America result in people flooding back into the treasury market, because this means that demand is going to increase quickly after yields go up, which means that checks back with the increase in supply. Go to their second warrant about growth accelerating. But the problem is what Rob Market Watch writes again days ago, that there's a 75% chance that interest rates remain the same as they are right now in 2019, and these rates are actually projected to drop in 2020, so these interest rate hikes are coming to an end. Go to austerity policies. Three dealings here. First, I know the 18 of CBS News writes that interest rates are higher when the economy is good, so the higher tax revenues from higher incomes offset higher interest payments. But second, dealing with the argument again, because Strauss 18 of the week writes that interest payments don't crowd out social spending means the government prints new money to pay off the interest, which doesn't raise inflation, means the money goes towards people who are saving treasuries, not spending the money. But I know 18 of CBS News writes that even if interest rates dramatically rise, they're still lower than the 1990s. Even with more debt, these interest rates are lower now. Go to their impact. Dealing with the top observation, put up high on the 18 of Wall Street Journal writes that the dollar has been weakening relative to emerging market currencies, so investors are staying in emerging markets, preventing any capital flight and higher interest rates in other countries. But second, there's an alt cost for any flight that is happening. The Spiro 18 of the South China Morning Post writes that any capital flight has been because investors are worried about the current account deficits in emerging markets, not interest rate hikes. But third, turn the argument, because MIM 18 of Bloomberg writes that 2/3 of the changes in capital flows to emerging markets is determined by emerging markets are growing much faster than the U.S. Thus, higher interest rates in America slow down the economy, increasing investment into the emerging markets. But fourth, dealing with the arguments, valuation pay on 18 of Wall Street Journal writes that emerging markets don't raise interest rates when America does anymore, because low inflation makes hikes impossible. Also, MIM 18 of Bloomberg writes that historically the correlation between higher interest rates in America and higher interest rates elsewhere is extremely limited. Then on downgrade, one, dealing, Burton 13 of Market Watch writes that after 2011, sounding the debt, the stock market and bond market immediately bounced back, which is why there wasn't a recession in the time period.
Wait, I still lost. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, some of the extensions from the case, the little front line and the little case. So it's going to start on the second warrant of interest rates. Even if we lose that the high economic growth is increasing interest rates, we still get an independent impact. The Horowitz evidence says the high deficit is causing the economy to overheat in the status quo, and Cox 18 explains the last time unemployment was this low, we saw a recession. That is very key. Because Kellner, which they draw, says if we prioritize the debt, we reduce demand in the economy, stop overheating. That is key. Because Tufts University finds the last recession pushed 100 million people into poverty. That is a guaranteed impact when you vote for us. But the other place you can vote for us is on our last argument of downgrade. He gives one blippy response, which it says in 2011 there was no impact. This is untrue. The master's evidence which they do not respond to. It says in 2011, even though it was a tiny downgrade, the stock market had the worst plunge in U.S. history. And we say this downgrade is coming. They drop the Gunn evidence that says if the downgrade happens, there will be a widespread asset sell-off, which will affect the global economy and plunges into another recession as another link into recession and turns their entire case. With this in mind, go to their case. At the top, their first evidence saying that there's 9 more years of growth has no warrant whatsoever, but for the idea that we're at full employment and inflation is already increasing. Let's go to their first warrant on the borrowing frenzy. First, Columbia 18 explains that individuals are borrowing the highest rate in U.S. history due to increased education costs and housing prices, which means A, they literally have no risk of solvency or marginal impact, or B, there's so many alt causes that overwhelmingly link. The borrowing costs have already increased by 40% in 2018, which is why Blumenthal 18 explains we're already seeing the credit bubble in the status quo. They literally have no marginal impact. Then they say, with this Clinton example, how it reduced borrowing by 30%. There's 2 issues. First, Wellen 12 explains that the root cause of this increase in borrowing in the Clinton era was only because of higher housing prices and nothing to do with anything they talk about. But second, Clinton literally cut taxes. That is their side. And what we would say is that surplus was not due to a reduction in the debt, it was due to higher economic growth, which only turns their internal link. But even if you want to ignore all of that, what Golker 17 explains is that a strong economy causes these people to borrow more. The reason why is they over-speculate because they believe when there's a stronger economy, there was more capital available to them, which is why he finds if actually there's a stronger economy and overheating, it will only lead to more bubbles and more recessions, which turns their entire case. But the biggest issue is the concession that Eshon gets in Crossfire. They completely concede that this recession is 100% inevitable because eventually we will reduce the debt. That is game over for my opponents. Because there's 2 reasons why it is better to get it over with right now. The first is the CFRB evidence, which is a cold drop in rebuttal, which is the reforms cost 21% more if we wait in 5 years, which means we make less cuts if we do it right now. But second, more importantly, we say a recession is already inevitable in the status quo due to overheating, which means again, there's no marginal impact. Let's go to their second warrant on safe assets. This is literally absolute nonsense. There's literally no link whatsoever because investors and individuals don't go from bonds to risky investments. The 2 things are inherently different. For example, an investor who invests in bonds will not move to a completely different pool of knowledge. It is way more likely that they go to foreign bonds like emerging markets, which only magnifies the link into our case and probably gives us another link independent of interest rates. But second, you can turn it because Hussein 18 explains that treasury bonds have started to perform more like equity because they fluctuated so much in 2018, which means we have the risk of solvency because even if you're investing in bonds, these are still risky investments that can still lead to this volatility. Then they say this Ray evidence that says that immediately following every debt reduction, we've seen some kind of recession. This card has no warrant whatsoever. You can call for it after the round, and also more importantly, it doesn't show any causality or that the debt reduction was the actual reason why these recessions happen. But lastly, they say that automatic stabilizers are key for getting out of the recession. That is literally our argument. We say from CFRB that if we act now, we don't have to cut as many automatic stabilizers, but we say if we just wait 5 years, the reforms cost 21% more money, which means if you want to have a better response to these recessions, you're definitely voting for us because if we get it over with in the status quo, we make less cuts, so we still have more welfare, more automatic stabilizers to respond to the recession, which turns their entire case again.
Ready for the boss?
Yeah. Begin.
So what happened in 2013 relative to emerging markets and the bonds?
I would say that's a really
Wait, just like answer my question. What happened in emerging markets? The emerging market bond bubble popped, which is why plenty of these countries plunged into recessions, right? So my question for you is, are foreign bonds safe or risky investments?
We would say that they're more risky, except there's more profits being made.
Okay, great. Do you have a question?
Yeah, sure. So let's talk about like your evidence saying that automatic stabilizers are important for getting out of recessions.
Yeah.
Can you give me one comparative advantage of getting or doing the recession like later on?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Stray gives you two in like the first cross. The first is that as the longer the period of economic expansion is, the more people are
Okay,
able
yeah,
to
let's talk
save,
about that.
which means they more
What is
savings to
the
ride out a
warrant of your,
recession.
what is the warrant of the CFA evidence saying that there's 9 more years of expansion?
Because of the fact that right now we have like good economic policy that is enabling our like
Wait,
country
wait,
to
wait.
expand,
Can
right?
you- Wait, good economic policy?
Yeah, like Trump's policies are great for investor confidence.
Okay,
Trump's
but I'm saying
policies are
like
great for the
overall,
economy
like
in
if you look at the
general.
macroeconomic trends, like inflation is increasing.
Wait, no,
it's
no,
full
no. What's our
employment.
target inflation rate right now in America?
It's increasing.
No, it's not. It's at
Yes.
our target. No,
No,
it's
that's not true.
That's
we
why
can give you
no.
evidence after. We can give you evidence saying it is
No,
increasing.
but you
in
like
2018,
specifically
in late
in
2018.
2018, sure. Our evidence from
Yeah.
literally like 2 days ago, I cut this last night, says very specifically that the Federal Reserve is literally not going to raise interest rates anymore
Wait,
in
okay,
2019
that doesn't
because they're
interact.
not afraid of higher inflation rates. But we spent a minute and a half on this.
Okay.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your analysis where you say that like it was the worst sell-off ever in the stock market history. So last time this happened, did it cause a recession?
We say that the difference now is that the idea that one of the smallest credit agencies had a tiny downgrade, let's say
Wait, last
that
time the
big of
downgrade
impact.
was from Moody's.
No,
right?
it's from S&P, which
Yeah,
is the
sure.
smallest of the
But the
3
point is,
credit
the
agencies.
stock-
Wait, let me clarify.
Yes.
It is the smallest of the 3 credit agencies, and the idea that the smallest of the 3 credit agencies with a tiny downgrade has a that big of an impact
Great.
shows
So-
that once Moody or one of the bigger credit agencies downgrade us
Let's
even
talk about,
further,
let's talk
then
about
the
your
impact is
evidence.
definitely
Let's talk about
likely.
your evidence saying that a downgrade is likely. Does it say they're going to downgrade like our debt, or does it just say that there's pressure that like in the long term there might be a problem with like our debt's credit rating?
Yeah, the Tripod evidence says the longer we wait, the more likely it is the downgrade
But it's
happens.
like it does not like explicitly say that they're going to downgrade the credit rating,
Well,
right?
obviously, like, it can't say like it's 100% going to happen.
No,
The
but it doesn't even
No,
speculate
no,
that it
no,
might happen.
that's not
it said
true.
that there's like there might be some
Okay,
pressure on the
no,
credit rating.
no, that's not
Does-
true. Sure.
I
So-
read your ad. It
Sure.
does not say
Even
that
the
they're going
Tripod
to downgrade.
evidence, if you want to ignore that, the Galani evidence also says the longer we wait, the more likely this credit downgrade happens.
Sure. Do you have a
But-
question?
Yeah. So let's talk about your TAMI evidence saying that investors aren't worried at all because of a massive productivity boom.
Yeah.
Over the last 20 years, we've had AI, right, which is the warrant of the TAMI card.
Wait, like AI definitely has accelerated in recent
Okay,
years.
sure.
Like 20 years ago,
Yeah,
we
sure.
hardly even had like
Well,
real
last 5 years,
household
sure.
computers.
Last 5 years.
Even in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
we would say it's still accelerating so much
so
now.
sure. Shouldn't it be a
Like
scalar impact though?
No,
Should
it's actually an exponential impact because
Okay,
it's
sure,
based
sure.
on
Even
machine
if it's an
learning
exponential
that accumulate over
impact,
time.
how has productivity changed in the last 5 years?
It's increased. I can
No,
read you
it's
evidence to that.
decreased.
Latest year of Wall Street Journal says that productivity is rising right now, which is why we're not overeating. We'll take the last 7 seconds for
first, starting on stocks, Burton says that in the long term, bonds recover, and the bonds and stocks recover, which means that even if stocks crash, there's no impact on the economy. But then second, on overheating. First, Blazer says that the wage growth is too low for the economy to overheat. But Garcia also says that 33% of college grads are underemployed, which means that if the economy grows more and we increase productivity, we actually make jobs available that match their qualifications. But then also Tony says that when productivity increases because of the automation boom, which means that there's productivity checks back with overheating. But then in a second class, he also concedes that foreign bonds are riskier, which means that it leads to bubbles in emerging markets, which leads to their case and probably much more in emerging markets because it's harder to ride out a recession there. But then go to our case. First he says that investors, and that on a second warrant about safe assets conundrum, he says that investors won't go to bonds and it's not related to risky investments. But we would say that any shift is inherently riskier and it leads to financial volatility because they no longer have the base of safe financial bonds, which is worse. But then second, Buchanan, you can extend our lead. Buchanan says that a decrease in debt means that the government is going to buy bonds back, and Krishnamurthy says that a decrease in the supply of treasury bonds means that investors are going to turn to riskier investments. And Acharya says that's especially bad because if you try and decrease the government debt, then when they invest in riskier investments, that's going to lead to bubbles because investors speculate more on overall assets. And then Acharya also says, which is really important, that safe assets are the best way to ride out a recession because it limits how far you can fall and actually provides a foundation, which is better. But then they say on our impact there's no warrant and there's no causality, but our evidence says that every single time in the past in history when we were trying to reduce the debt, it's led to a recession. We would say that the warrant still stands, and that's especially problematic, and that's how they do affirm. But then also on long term versus short term, where they say it's better to save a recession now, we would say that's worse because people actually will save less. The facts of a recession are worse, and it's just overall and because there's going to be a recession in the emerging markets because foreign bonds are riskier, we would say that voting neg is the best way.
Yes, sir.
I'll start on their case and go down our case.
Where under your case?
Just like the second one. Alright, everybody good? Thank you. lose the round when they can see the US will inevitably have to pay off the debt at some point. At this point, it's preferable to pay off the debt right now because the CFPB says if we wait 5 years, reforms go up by 21%. That means any bubble in their world is only much bigger, more people go into poverty. You can vote right here. But then on safe assets, two problems here. First, Ezra tells you from rebuttal that investors don't shift from bonds to risky investments. They just say foreign investments are more risky. We would tell you they give you no warrant for this, and anyways, it's better to go to foreign economies because they need it more. But more importantly, we would say they don't shift from bonds to stocks. They would get to go to other bonds which are inherently going to be more safer. But second, they don't get any option values because Hussein tells you very clearly that treasury bond values have fluctuated so much recently that at this point they're still risky investments. So even if the bubble still forms because the risky investments are still true like through bonds. But then overheat. Horowitz tells you that deficit is sparking overheat due to injections of unneeded stimulus in the economy. And Cox tells you the last time unemployment was this low, it sparked a recession. They just say unemployment isn't max, but the Fed doesn't look at unemployment. It says if the economy is growing so fast. That's why Counter says if by taking out the deficit and reducing the debt, we will take out purchasing power from the economy, slowing down the economy. And this is really important because Cox tells you if the US goes into a recession, 100 million people worldwide will go into poverty. But then on downgrade, they say the 2011 the stock market crash had no impact. But Masters Day drop tells you it caused the largest single day drop in the stock market history. But more importantly, we would say only one small agency decreased the rating by a little bit. If every agency comes out together and says, oh my god, the US is very bad credit rating, that's when we see a much bigger impact. And Bloomberg tells you if we need an immediate response right now, if we don't have that, we get pushed closer to the fiscal cliff, that's where we get our impact. And Galani says it will have a widespread asset sale-offs, which is tough to quantify. It's 100 million people going into poverty because of a recession. But at the end of the day, we outweigh on probability because we tell you at the end, because we tell you they have no unique offense because at the end of the day, since we can push the reforms back later, the bubble just gets bigger. But also we would say we outweigh in scope because 100 million people is much bigger than any impact they go for, and lastly magnitude because a global recession will push people into poverty.
Great. Are you guys ready for grand?
Oh yeah.
Time starts now. So let's talk about the analysis you read on how a recession later is much worse than a recession now because the reforms are a lot more, right? Yeah. So how do you have access to this turn if it's a cross-application of your first impact that you don't fraud?
No. Independent of that, all we say is just the idea that waiting longer means that the debt continues to grow and we can make harsher cuts.
No,
even if interest rates don't change, and even if your link defense is true, just the idea that the debt is still compounding over time and is getting bigger means that the longer we wait, we need more cuts.
Getting bigger mean that we have to cut it more?
Wait, if there's a larger
Why
debt.
can't we just take a more gradual approach to reducing the debt?
Also, this response was in literally 0 speeches in this round.
Wait,
so,
no, because you dropped the link defense on your sub A, so you don't have access to your 21%
I just told you the defense on the sub point A doesn't interact whatsoever.
The important
with
thing
different
is the Schwartz card is very explicit in saying that even if interest rates don't change, interest payments will be $7 trillion by 2026.
Sure. But our link defense functions is that because of the fact that interest payments now are still lower than the levels of the 1990s, and growing economies means that interest payments are super low no matter what. That means that this link defense still applies.
No. Okay, that misunderstands the argument. We're not saying that rising interest rates is the link.
No,
we're just saying
interest payments.
Yeah, no, we're just saying when there's a larger debt, we have to pay more interest rates, not necessarily higher interest rates, but just more interest rates.
Interest payments, I'm aware, but the link defense.
No, your link defense is that interest rates are low. We say even if that is true.
Link defense at the top.
That's what you just said.
The defense on your impact, which is specifically
anyways, we're going
interest
into
payments. Yeah, sure.
So you guys try to frontline overheat by saying the Fed will look at we'll look for unemployment and say we're not full employment, we can still have room to grow.
Wait, no. It says wage growth is super low because 33% of college graduates are unemployed.
The issue is all that matters is what the Fed perceives is happening. And the evidence so the evidence that Ishan reads in rebuttal says the Fed perceives that there's right now full employment. So even if you win that 33% of people are in this other thing.
You drop the link defense that in 2019 there's a 75% chance that there's not going to be another interest hike, and by 2020
that has nothing to do with our argument. It has literally nothing to do with the argument.
No, the Federal Reserve, the way the Federal Reserve acts right now to slow down the economy is by hiking interest rates. If they're not going to hike interest rates, it doesn't cause the effect you're talking about. Overheating starts in the labor market, causes wage growth, which drives inflation while productivity doesn't match, which is why the Federal Reserve hikes interest rates. But if productivity is rising and the Federal Reserve isn't rising interest rates, we're not going to have a recession.
No, but the problem is you keep saying productivity is going to rise. But what we say is what's important is the perception that the Fed has regarding productivity.
The Fed's perception is to not raise interest rates.
our card says they believe that right now the economy is
Our
already
card
starting
started
to
2 days
overheat.
ago saying that's not going to happen. There's a 75% probability that there's not going to be a single hike in 2019 and in 2020. Interest rates are actually going to go down, which has dropped defense on that argument.
I think that's
Is everyone ready? I'm gonna start on my case. Time starts now. First, they say that a recession inevitably is going to happen, and it's going to be a lot worse. These reforms cost a lot more than. They drop 2 front lines here. First, Ray says that the time frame matters because an expansion, the longer an expansion, people save more. A recession is much worse. They're able to write it out. But second, they can't win. Axis is turned without winning. That interest payments don't go up, but they drop the defense on their first subpoint A, which is the Ivan Nova evidence, which says that because of a booming economy, interest payments are super low, which means that this isn't going to happen. But then, on our argument about a shift to bonds, they say that we're only going to shift to bonds, not to stocks. What Australia tells you is that no matter what, you are going to shift to something much more volatile than the Treasury. That frontlines both of the responses. It doesn't matter. The Treasury is risky. Australia groups them both. Says that specifically you see more financial volatility, which is why you extend the Buchanan evidence that says that a reduction in debt means we buy back bonds, and the Krishnamurthy evidence says that this decrease in supply of bonds leads to riskier investments. It doesn't matter what investments they are. Every investment is more risky than a Treasury. And the Acharya evidence says that this means that it creates economic bubbles or whatever it is. For example, their own emerging markets argument applies here because it created a bubble in emerging markets in 2013. And the Acharya evidence says that even if you want to believe them that recessions inevitable, the more safe assets and the higher levels of debt mean that we have a stable base where we cannot fall below that base, which means that absolutely a recession is much less worse. That's why the Ray evidence, the only comparatively round, says that every single time we reduce the debt, we've seen a scathing recession immediately after. That's 100% probability every single time in the history of the country. Go to their case. They extend 2 pieces of offense here. First is overheating. They don't frontline a single thing Australia says. One, that wage growth is too low and underemployment is at 33%. We have a lot more slack in the economy. And B, the raw evidence that they drop in Robel and somebody says that a 75% chance we don't raise hikes, and by 2020 you're going to see a decrease in interest rates by the Federal Reserve. It's not a perception. Then on their argument about asset sell-offs, the problem is here. One, you can please call for their evidence. Their evidence is being greatly magnified as the round progresses. It does not say a credit rating is going to go down, but B, realize that Australia tells you historically when we happen, you've seen the economy like rebound, which is why specifically there's going to be not a problem here, but B, we outweigh on time frame. They don't show when this happens. A time frame now, a recession now is much worse than a recession later because of the fact that people save less money. That way is dropped, and recession short circular solvency because they balloon deficits because of the fact that tax revenues fall.
Yeah, we'll use lots of these So it's gonna go like there's subpoint B, and then or like down to itself. Okay. They just assert in their last speech that these investors will move to some more risky type of investment without ever responding to the terminal defense that is extended in summary, which says that these investors do not know, like, it's a different pool of knowledge. They would never go from bonds to a risky investment that is conceded terminal defense on their case. But even if you do not want to believe that, they cold drop the Hussein evidence, which says in the status quo, the treasury bonds are already more risky and fluctuating in 2018, which means comparatively, these bonds are just as risky as anything they talk about. And insofar as it's conceded evidence, if you want to vote on asset bubbles, or if you want to vote on this volatility argument, you're definitely voting for us because they concede a term that is completely extended in summary. All they say is that the recession is better to do it now because people will save more. This makes literally no sense. The CFRB evidence is a muddle all around and never adequately respond who says the cost of reforms cost 21% more if we act later. They just say that interest rates are not going up. We say if the debt as a whole gets higher, we still make more payments even if the rate itself does not grow. Again, that is conceded analysis that is in summary, which means means, again, we still make it. That means that if this recession is inevitable, it is way better to just get it over with now. These reforms cost way more in the future, and they drop the evidence of the idea that these stabilizers are important for getting out of the recession, which means there's more cuts if you vote for them. At that point, you're definitely voting for us on their case, and even if you're not, we definitely have criminal defense that they do not respond to. But the easiest place in today's round to vote for us is on the argument of downgrade. They extend one response in final focus, saying the economy will rebound. What we say is the only time this ever happened was in 2011. It was a very small downgrade. It was the smallest of all the credit agencies. We say in the status quo, the Japan evidence says the longer we wait, the closer we get to the fiscal cliff. They just say we don't give any time frame, but we would say we're going to outweigh on magnitude a little lower. And Galani says this will lead to a global asset sale, which is conceded in the last speech. That sparks a global recession, and tough as the last time it's happened, it pushed 100 million people into poverty. All this is conceded. We say this outweighs anything they give you, because we say they literally give no link defense. We outweigh on strength of 100%. We say if you vote for them, it's a global asset sale that pushes 100 million people into poverty, according to Tufts, which also gets conceded, which means we also outweigh there on probability. It has already happened. That's why we are proud to